Hey everyone, I'm Ronan and welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing an overview of every single feat inside Baldur's Gate 3. This includes the early access feats as well as all the new ones announced by Larian Studios coming on release. Before we dive in, note every single class will be able to gain a feat at level 4, which is great because you can get one pretty early. Specifically though, rogues and fighters do gain extra feats, meaning they have the ability to customize a little bit more than other classes. Instead of taking a feat though, which is essentially a way to change the way your character plays slightly, you do have the option for ability improvements, meaning you can add 2 ability scores to either your strength, dex, constitution, intelligence, charisma, and wisdom. And this is never a bad thing because you do want to get your primary stat, for example, dex for rogues for damage, to level 20, which is the max, as soon as possible, because that will increase your modifier, which will help do damage as well. Alright, without further ado, let's go ahead and go down the list. I'm going to start in alphabetical order. So the first feat you can choose other than ability improvement is Actor. And this one is pretty good because this increases your charisma score by 1. So you do gain a charisma score, which is great. And you have advantage on charisma, deception, and performance checks when trying to pass yourself as someone else. So if you're playing a class that has disguised self and you want to RP in the game, or maybe you need a certain chat for whatever reason, this would be pretty good for you. Alert. You can't be surprised when you are conscious. You gain a +5 to initiative, and other creatures don't gain advantage on attack rolls against you when they are unseen by you. This is actually really decent and going to be useful for a good amount of classes. Getting +5 to initiative is never a bad thing. That just means you're more likely to go first in combat, which is always great, especially if you're a stealth class. But the fact that you also won't have any disadvantage on yourself for being surprised is really nice, meaning the enemy won't have a higher chance to hit you if they're unseen by you. So if you have a stealth monster that attacks you, the chance for them to attack you is going to be normal compared to them having a higher chance. So alert's pretty decent. Next is Athletic, increases your strength or dexterity by 1 to a maximum of 20, and when you are prone, standing uses less movement. This one is okay. Throughout early access, I didn't really have that many scenarios when I went prone and found it to be that big of a deal where I had to get, escape. So this one is okay because it does give you strength or dex +1 and it does have an added effect, but overall, I don't think it's something you would pick first, maybe later on. After that, we have Charger, which is one of the new announced feats, and this one I really do like. When you use your dash action, you can use it as a bonus action to make 1 melee attack or to shove a creature. If you move at least 10 feet in a straight line immediately before taking this bonus action, you gain +5 to the attack damage roll if you chose a melee attack, or push a target up to 10 feet away from you if you chose to shove the target instead, assuming you do succeed on that. So essentially what this is saying is if you go into combat and you're just charging in, normally charging is going to take up extra rolls for you. Well, this allows you to charge and shove or charge and attack. Can you imagine being something that's wearing heavy plate armor, whether you're a paladin or a fighter, and you just instantly go into combat, instantly push the enemy like 10 feet away or get an attack? That's really great considering that's something you would normally not be able to do because you'd have to choose. After that, we have Crossbow Expert, and this one is going to be pretty deadly for people that know how to use it. You ignore the loading quality of crossbows, which you are now proficient in, which is pretty nice, but it does have the added benefit of being within 5 feet of hostile creatures, do not impose disadvantage on your ranged attack rolls. Normally you would, so already you gain 2 benefits there, but when you use the attack action with a one-handed weapon, you can use a bonus action to attack with a hand crossbow you are holding. This is super powerful, and this is actually going to be really insane with the sharpshooter trait that we'll talk about later. But for anyone that is a dual wielder and using crossbows, this is going to be really good for you. Next on the list, we have Defensive Duelist. When you're attacked within melee, you can use your reaction to increase your armor class, potentially causing the attack to miss. And armor class, also known as AC, literally is a number which tells the game whether you are getting hit or not. So this could really save you, especially if it's going to be attack that's pretty strong. However, is it the best? I guess it really depends on playstyle. It's not bad though. Dual Wielder. Gain a +1 to armor class when wielding a melee weapon in each hand. You can use 2-weapon fighting even if your weapons aren't considered light. I actually really like this one a lot. If you plan to play a rogue, this is really great because you can use a little bit of heavier weapons in each hand. Especially if you're a drow rogue, you automatically get proficiency in rapiers. So if you have this trait, you can put a rapier in each hand while dual wielding and really amp up your damage a lot. So this one is pretty good for anyone that plans to dual wield. Not only do you get the extra AC, so it's less chance for enemies to hit you, but it allows you to do a little bit of more damage as well. Dungeon Delver. You had advantage on wisdom, perception, and intelligence investigation checks in order to make the presence of secret doors known. Pretty decent. You have advantage on saving throws made to avoid and resist traps. You have resistance to damage dealt by traps. Traveling at a fast pace doesn't impose the normal -5 penalty on your passive wisdom perception in order to see things. So this is one more so for, especially if you're a rogue, to see traps. This is going to be pretty useful to you, though most rogues would already have their stuff set up to where they could do that without this. It just makes it a little bit better. So if you're a class that normally doesn't have great perception, or if you just want to be better at it, this one's pretty good. Overall though, it's not something that I'm excited for. Durable. Increases your constitution score by 1 to a max of 20. And when you roll hit die to regain HP points, the minimum number of points you regain equals twice your constitution modifier. Or like additional points. I don't like this one. This one, it's just, I don't like it because once you learn how to play and know what you're doing, more than likely you're not gonna get hit. And you can always heal out of combat pretty easily, so this one doesn't seem that great to me. The next one, Elemental Adept, I think it's gonna be situationally useful, but it does have some great uses. So when you gain this feat, you can choose one of the 5 elements: acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder. And this is going to make you more adept with that. Spells you cast ignore resistance to that damage type. For most people who don't know, fire starts off really strong, but normally can kind of fall off later on because you do fight a lot of monsters that are fire resistant. Well, taking this feat with fire means you ignore that fire resistance, so fire will always be good for you. If you're a caster, this is great because you could pretty much choose one element and really just go hardcore with it and maybe like you're the best fire user or the best lightning user. So it's really useful for that, and you can take this multiple times. However, I think it would be a waste to take it multiple times. Usually if you're taking this, it's because you are a caster that kind of just goes with one type of school of magic. So for that, it's really good. Other than that, it's okay. Okay, so next we are going to be talking about one of the most powerful traits in the game if you use a two-handed weapon, and that is Great Weapon Master. When a melee attack scores a critical hit or kills a creature, which is nice because you have 2 options there, you can make another melee attack as a bonus action. When attacking with heavy weapons you are proficient with, attack rolls take a -5 penalty, but their damage is increased by 10 points minimum. That is absolutely insane. The -5 hit is pretty bad, but there are plenty of ways to negate that, and once you learn how to do that, this trait will make two-handed weapons just completely massacre the enemy, especially barbarians. Like, I love this on my, like, if you're a half-orc barbarian, because of their racials in combination with this, that alone is just a crazy deadly trait. Okay, next you have Heavily Armored. You gain proficiency with heavy armor. It increases your strength score by 1. This is nice for classes that normally don't gain heavy armor. However, most classes that would normally use it are martial classes like paladins, fighters. You already gain heavy armor just for being that class, so it's okay. A better trait, in my opinion, is Heavy Armor Master. It increases your strength by 1, and when you are wearing heavy armor, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage you would normally take from non-magic attacks is reduced by 3. So not only do you gain an ability score, which is nice, but you also will take less damage from essentially all melee damage in the game. So this one's pretty great for those tanky characters that like to go in and just take hits. Lightly armored is kind of the same as heavy armored. You gain proficiency with light armor. It increases your strength or dex by 1 to a maximum of 20. Kind of the same thing with heavily armored. This could be useful for some classes, but overall I don't think it's that great of a feat. Okay, so next we have Lucky. And Lucky, I'm curious on how it's going to really kind of check out in Baldur's Gate 3, because in D there's a lot you can do with it. But essentially in Baldur's Gate 3, you're going to get 3 luck points. So whenever you make an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, if you fail, you can choose to use your luck point to re-roll the die and hopefully get a better roll. This is useful and not useful. You gain your luck points anytime you have a long rest. However, there are still a chance you fail. Say you go for an ability check and you fail. Well, you use Lucky. You use one of your luck points and you roll it. You can technically fail that luck roll as well. So it can be really useful, especially if you whiff an attack, but it also isn't guaranteed. Mage Slayer. When a creature within 5 feet of you casts a spell, you gain a reaction to make a melee attack against them. When you damage a creature that is concentrating on a spell, they have disadvantage on a saving throw to maintain the concentration. And you have advantage on saving throws against spells cast by any creature within 5 feet of you. This one's pretty decent because it gives you attack of opportunity, mainly just anytime they're casting near you. But for the most part, casters are going to be pretty far away. So this one's situational. I mean, if you're a ranger, for example, using a bow, you're never going to use this trait, but it could be useful for some melee classes. Next on the list is going to be some feats I'm just putting together right here, and that's the Magic, Initiate, Bard, Cleric, Druid, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard. The reason I say that is because all these things do essentially the same thing. You either gain a spell slot and get to learn a first level spell from that type of class, for example Cleric, or you gain a cantrip and a spell from that class as well. And that spell that you cast, the damage is based on their modifier. So Bards use Charisma, Clerics use Wisdom, Warlocks use Charisma. These feats, I don't want to say they're terrible because they do have some situational uses. But normally, if you want a spell from another class, you're usually going to multi-class anyway, which then defeats the purpose of these feats. Martial Adept. This allows you to gain a Battle Master trait, kind of. So you can learn 2 Battle Master maneuvers, which is a subclass of the fighter, and use 1 superiority die to fuel them. Normally, Battle Masters gain 3. If you're not a Battle Master, which most people aren't, if you're using this feat, you gain 1 dice. And this will allow you to use their subclass maneuvers in a way. So for example, Riposte is one of those skills you could use. And Riposte is when you dodge an attack or a creature misses you in melee combat, you can use your reaction to retaliate and deal damage. Weapon damage, 1d8 piercing, for example. I haven't actually used this in game. In D&D, this is okay. I'm not a big fan of it because I feel like if you want these, you'd be better off being the fighter anyway. But it can definitely have some interesting uses. Okay, there's a trait I do want to talk about because at first it seems pretty nice, but I'm going to tell you why it's really not that great and it's misleading. That is Medium Armor Master. Medium Armor does not impose disadvantage on dexterity stealth checks, which seems pretty nice because normally they would. When you wear medium armor, you can add 3 rather than 2 to your AC if you have a dexterity stat of 16 or higher. So if you think about it, medium armor for the most part has a little bit of higher AC compared to light armor. And if you're a rogue, for example, you can't wear medium armor normally. That being said though, you can only add a max of +3 for your dex modifier to the AC. So once you get your dex maxed out, or not even, once you get your dex to 18 or higher, it won't matter because the max stat you can add is 3. Normally, if your dex is 18, you get +4, and if it's 20 maxed out, you get +5. So this loses value the more you level up. I'm not a big fan of this trait, and I consider this trait to be really misleading and kind of garbage. Okay, so another trait we have is mobile. It increases your speed, which is great. And when you use the dash action, difficult terrain does not slow you down. You also move after making a melee attack. Like if you choose to do that, you do not provoke an opportunity attack. This one I think is really good because it already gives you increased movement speed in combat, which is nothing to scoff at. That could really mean whether you're in range to hit someone or not with a melee attack. But what's really great is normally if you're next to an enemy and you go to run away, they'll get an attack of opportunity, meaning they can hit you. Well, with this, they don't do that, which is pretty nice. And you don't take any terrain disadvantage when you dash, so you can really move around the battlefield a lot. If you're a rogue that already gets extra like bonus actions, this combination of that is really good, but this can be useful for any class. Okay, up next is moderately armored. You have proficiency with medium armor and shields, and you can increase your strength or dex score by 1. Again, this is pretty decent because you get a modifier to your scores, but you gain the bonus of using shields and medium armor if you couldn't before. Okay, observant. This is a fantastic trait that's universally good for anyone. You gain intelligence or wisdom score by 1 to a max of 20, which is pretty good if you have an odd number and want to get it to that even number to get a higher modifier. But you also gain a +5 bonus to perception and investigation scores. And perception is super useful in this game to find things. You'd be surprised how much you overlook if your perception isn't high enough. So this one is going to be useful pretty much for anyone. Performer. You gain musical instrument proficiency and increases your charisma by 1. This is great because anyone can play that class fantasy of being a bard and playing for other people to listen, but you get a higher charisma modifier as well, which is really great for those interactions. POLEARM Master. This one is pretty cool and something I want to try. I didn't get to test it in Baldur's Gate 3, but it looks interesting. So, POLEARM Master. When you take an attack action, an attack with a glaive, halberd, quarterstaff, or spear, you gain a bonus action to make a melee attack with the opposite end of the weapon. So imagine you stab someone with the end of your halberd. You can now bonus action and hit them with the blunt end of it as well for extra damage. The attack that uses the bonus action, the modifier, uses the same ability as your primary attack, so more than likely strength. The weapons die for this is a D4, and it deals bludgeoning damage. But here's what's really cool. When you're wielding a glaive, halberd, pike, quarterstaff, or spear, creatures that walk within range of you gain attacks of opportunity. And if you don't know, most of these weapons, like glaives and halberds, for example, have extended reach, so they can actually attack someone from further away than you would normally be able to if you say were using a greatsword. So this is really great for kind of like anyone that wants to use these weapons. For example, if you want like a dragoon fantasy and you want to be kind of tanky, so not only will you get bonus attacks to hit someone with the opposite end of your glaive for extra damage, but if their friend comes to help them and they come within your range, you can attack them as well. So it is really useful, and I really like this. Another really universally great trait is going to be resilient. So you get to increase a chosen ability score by 1, so any score you want, and you gain proficiency in saving throws for that chosen ability. This is actually really, really great because a lot of classes don't gain Constitution as their ability score or as their saving throw, and you will, like, there will be tons of times you need to make Constitution saving throws, and having proficiency with that is going to be great if you already don't have it. And having extra HP is never a bad thing, but you can put this in other stats as well. I just like using Constitution as a example for people. Ritual Caster. This goes back to what we talked about earlier with multiclassing. I just feel like this trait feels kind of useless because if you're going to multiclass, you'll gain the spells of other classes anyway. And this one's really restrictive. I'll have one screen exactly what it does, but I don't like this trait at all. Savage Attacker. This is another trait that is really misleading. It states, once per turn, when you roll damage for a melee weapon attack, you can re-roll the weapon's dice and use either total. So this sounds really good, like, oh man, I scuffed my damage, I rolled really low, that's not good, let me roll it again. Well, there's a chance that when you roll it again, you could roll worse. For example, say you rolled for 3 damage, you use this and roll again, now you roll for 1 damage. So it seems kind of like a waste. But if instead of taking this, if you just put 2 points into your main stat, for example, melee people use strength for their weapons usually, if it's not finesse for like a greatsword, well, you're already gaining extra damage every time you hit just from having a higher ability modifier. So why use this when you can just gain overall damage every single time by increasing your main stat? So I don't like Savage Attacker, it's misleading. Up next we have the feat Sentinel, and this one I haven't actually played with, so I can't tell you how good it is, but I am going to give you my opinion on it. When you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, that creature's speed becomes 0, meaning they can no longer move for the rest of their turn. This is great for enemies that you know are going to run away, for example like goblins and other small creatures that like to do that. But it's actually useless if no one runs away from you. But creatures that provoke opportunity attacks from you, even if they have the disengage ability, will still happen. Overall, I can see this being decent for creatures you know are going to run because now they're stuck next to you so other people can follow up. But other than that, I don't know how useful it's going to be. So this is one I really can't judge, but I'm not going to take it. Okay, as mentioned earlier, Sharpshooter. This thing is great. It's kind of like Great Weapon Master, but for ranged weapons. Attacking at long range does not impose disadvantage on ranged weapon attacks, which is great because who wants disadvantage? But your ranged weapon attacks ignore half and 3/4 cover, which is great. That means your chance to hit's even better. And before you make a ranged attack that you are proficient with, which if you're attacking with a ranged weapon you would be, you can choose to take a -5 penalty to the attack roll, and if it hits, you add +10 to the damage. This is absolutely insane. Like mentioned before, there are plenty of ways to get past that -5 penalty to hit, and once you do, gaining that extra 10 damage is going to be huge. Okay, next we have Shield Master. You gain a +2 bonus to dexterity saving throws when wielding a shield. If a spell forces you to make a dexterity saving throw, you can use your reaction to shield yourself instead, and on a successful save, you take 0 damage. This is actually really great because most shield wielding classes, for example like a paladin, they don't have dexterity as a proficient saving throw, so getting +2 to that is really nice. And the fact that if you do succeed, you would, instead of taking half damage, you would take 0 damage. This is really nice. It essentially gives you a way to block spells with your shield. Skilled, universally great for anyone. You gain proficiency in a combination of any 3 skills of your choice. This is more for out of combat things. For example, stealth checks. You can get increased proficiency with perception, investigation, things like that. So overall, this is really good for out of combat stuff. Okay, for all those casters out there, this next one is going to be good for you. Spell Sniper. So when you use a spell that requires an attack roll, your spell's range is doubled. That is amazing, because that means you can really hit people from super far. The range spell ignores half cover and 3/4 cover, so your chance to hit is even greater. And it allows you to learn a cantrip as well from any chosen class that also can use attack rolls. So again, if you're already going to be spell casting and you want to increase the range of your spells, this is going to be good, but you also gain an additional cantrip as well. Okay, we only have a few more to go. Next is Tavern Brawler. This increases your strength or constitution score by 1 to a max of 20. Again, because you get the ability modifier right there, it's going to be decent, the ability score. But you're proficient with improvised weapons. Your unarmed strikes use a d4 for damage. And when you hit a creature with an unarmed strike or improvised weapon on your turn, you can use a bonus action to grapple the target. This is going to be great for kind of more so RP reasons. Anytime I attack a target, I'm going to be using my weapon. But what happens if your weapon, for whatever reason, in combat is dropped? Maybe they did something and you drop your weapon. Well, now you can still do damage, or any improvised weapon can still do damage as well. So this is okay. Could be better, could be worse. Situationally useful though. Tough increases your maximum hit points by 2 for each level. This would be better if your max level was higher, but in Baldur's Gate 3, max level is only 12. So I'm not sure how useful this will actually be, but gaining extra HP is never a bad thing if you really need it. Okay, next you have Warcaster. And this one is pretty decent for anyone that has knowledge of spells that they know for sure would be considered a concentration spell, meaning you have to concentrate. Every turn there's a chance the spell will end. What this does is you have advantage on Constitution saving throws to maintain your concentration on a spell when you take damage, which is great. But if you don't take any damage, this is kind of useless. You also can contain parts of the spell even when wielding a shield or a weapon of both hands. And when hostile creatures' movement provokes attacks of opportunity from you, you can use your reaction to cast a spell at that creature rather than using the attack of opportunity as a melee attack. The spell must have a casting time of 1 action though, and can only target that one creature. So this is pretty cool for especially caster hybrids, for example. If you know you're a class that has melee attacks as well as spells as well, this could be really useful. And honestly, it's just gaining the actual advantage for saving throws when being hit for concentration spells is pretty nice as well. But this is one of those feats where you really kind of need to know the build you want to go for before using it. But you can reclass almost at any time in the game, so feel free to try it out, or try out any of these at that point. And the final one on the list is Weapon Master. It increases your strength or dexterity by 1, and you gain proficiency with 4 weapons of your choice. So if there's a weapon you really want to use and your class can't use it for whatever reason, get this, you get an ability score modifier, and you can use that weapon now. Pretty good trait. Those are all the traits that I know of that were announced that were already in early access, as well as new ones announced by Larian Studios. If there are more that I missed, please let me know in the comments. And if there are more coming, I will definitely make sure to review them in the game itself. But for right now, these are my opinions on all of the feats in the game. If you found this useful, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye. And if you made it to the end of this video, I did want to say thank you. I got a lot of great support from the last video, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I was going to come back to YouTube or not after my other channel was taken down. So I did want to express my gratitude. I really appreciate everyone that's watched these videos so far, and I really hope you enjoy the content coming forward.